I would like to call the meeting of the Education Operations Committee to order. During this meeting, board members will in many cases be hearing information presented to them for the first time. Their responses will in many cases be extemporaneous and should not be considered either their final opinion on a matter, nor should any opinion expressed by an individual board member during any meeting be considered the opinion of the board as a whole unless it is presented by the presiding officer as such. Item number 2 on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. I would seek a motion to approve the minutes of January 28th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Item number 3 on the agenda is the elementary math resource adoption.
Good evening. My name is Darren Catlin. I am the PK8 math specialist, and we bring before you today a comprehensive look at the vetting process that we have been undertaking for the last 18 months. So it's been a pretty comprehensive process, and we'd like to take you through the steps that we have gone through to get to this point where we will bring before you a recommendation for the adoption of a K-5 math resource for the 2019-20 school year. And it's a 6-year proposal.
Hi, I'm Amy Abbott-Akey. I teach at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. We've had many members be part of this team coming forward. We've had Lisa Dennehy, Shelley Ermansky, Kelly Meeks, Heidi Burris, Chris Giebel, Laura Senor, Carolyn Rawlings, Jim Bauman, Cassie Talbert, Ware, I don't know, Emily Martin, Sarah Culver, Jen Davidson, Morgan Post, Darren Catlin, Julie Spalding, Matt Adams, myself, Amy Bowler, Laura Morris, Melissa Piet, Reggie Smith, Rebecca Savakis, Krista Mallory, Amanda Patterson, Chris Nyman, Libby White, John Uding, Judy Lodel, and Andrea Sheridan. These members represent a number of different math leadership experiences. There's members from every elementary building that have been represented here. Everything from pre-K through grade 5 experience. And then we've had a variety of years of experience in service in education. The different roles also include science, EL, SPED, RTI, GT, administration, and technology.
I'm Julie Spalding, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the first steps in this adoption process. It started way back in October of 2017. We started by developing a long-range plan on how we were going to go about doing research, collecting data, looking at needs, and reaching out to different vendors to find what would be a possible good matches for our needs in our district. So we conducted phone interviews with various school districts, with various companies. We participated in webinars from various resources and various math experts around the country. We met with vendors from Wisconsin and throughout the United States. We also conducted research using Ed Reports and achieved the core. So this process started out with an extensive amount of time and research way back in 2017.
I'm Morgan Post. I teach 5th grade at Red Mountain Elementary School. So to begin our process, the team, we met in May, and we started with a book study from this book, Principles to Action, Ensuring Mathematics Success for All. And from that, there were 6 essential elements that we were looking at and learning from when we read through this book over the summer. And those were teaching and learning, access and equity, curriculum, assessment, professionalism, and tools and technology. And from there, our team identified 33 indicators that fell under those 6 essential elements. And each item was deemed an important criteria for us in order to ensure success for all students. So then from these protocols, we essentially created our rubric for our vetting process when we looked at all of the curriculums.
When we initially started, we had 15 resources that we initially vetted. Those resources were picked from local districts around the area and what they were using, and resources that we had found online and through various Ed reports and Achieve the Core. From those 15 resources, Julie Spalding and myself were able to narrow that down to 7, which you see on the next screen. Oops, sorry, I'm a little behind. These 7 resources were then deemed to be viable choices for the Wausau School District based on those protocols that were chosen by the team and those indicators. These 7 resources met what we were looking for, and we felt they were appropriate for us to dig deeper into for the Wausau School District.
So then I'm Jen Davidson, I teach 5th grade at Jefferson. And these 7 resources then were able to come in and present to each of us. We started out by looking at the materials, both the online and the print resources, to see if we had questions as we went through. The vendors, when they came in, were given 90 minutes to present, and then they had 15 minutes of question and answer. And then after the presentation, we all got back together and discussed what we saw, if we had any more questions. And we used those rubrics that Morgan had talked about. The top 3 vendors after everybody was allowed to present, ended up being Eureka Math, Ready Classroom Math, and Origo Stepping Stones. And those 3 got to move on to the next process. And that next step then was we invited those 3 back, and they were allowed 40 minutes to present, and they all came back on the same day, so we could see them back to back to back. And they had to present a primary lesson and an intermediate lesson, and then had a 20-minute question and answer session after that. And then the team came back together again, a lot of discussion going on, and we debriefed and had to vote again on what would move forward. And all 3 of those resources ended up moving forward to the next step.
And I'm Laura Morris. I'm one of the instructional technology integrationists, and I was able to be a part of 2 of the 3 site visits, which was the next step in the 3 resources that were chosen. So a team of different teachers, specialists, and administrators got to visit 3 different sites to see each of those resources. We had a standard list of questions that we asked while we were there, and we got to meet with principals and teachers, and had the ability to observe a lot of different environments and lessons. And then from that, we brought that back to the rest of the team for our final meeting. We shared what we found with the rest of the team. And after our first kind of initial sharing out, we narrowed it down to 2 of the 3 resources. And that we eliminated Eureka Math in the morning. And then we had time to dig back into those rubrics, have more discussions about Ready and Origo, and decide finally which one it would be. And our final vote was for Ready Classroom Math to be selected.
And that is our brief presentation of the 18-month process that we went through. We did spend a lot of time discussing. We had a wide variety of people, all who had very, very staked interest in what we were going to bring to you. We'd like to thank you for your time. And at this time, if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them for you.
I have a question. So you just referenced the vote, and it's a large committee. I think I counted 29 individuals. Mm-hmm. Was that a unanimous vote for this curriculum?
It was not a unanimous vote. I think it was...
It was 2/3.
2/3.
I always have lots of questions. You've been disappointed if I didn't, I know. You know, when in the past, when we've picked different series, there's always a big gap between primary and intermediate. So what what made you, why were you able to settle on one math curriculum? You know, sometimes we've gone to two companies. So what was it in this company that was good for primary and intermediate?
Well, one of the things that we were really cognizant of was the fact that we wanted to make sure that at the primary level, it really built foundational skills, and then built on those foundational skills. I, in the past, was a third grade teacher, and I saw when there's a split that is often challenging for third graders when it splits a series. So we were very aware of the fact that we wanted to make sure at that K2 level, those students really, that the resource had a really strong foundation, and that's what we found. So the foundation then built from there.
In the primary, is it going to be consumables? I mean, you know, that's always a big thing too, is that, you know, when you said it's a 6-year program, and sometimes companies have only had consumables in the primary for the first 2 years, and then they didn't pay for them anymore. Are there consumables in the primary?
And I think, Teresa, I'll address that.
Okay.
Darren and I are currently in negotiations with the representative from Curriculum Associates. That's the parent company for Classroom Ready Math. And it is a 6-year, certainly, purchase, and it is consumables for all 6 years.
Okay, good.
With an option of online as well. We recognize that we wouldn't, it could be a challenge to move us from maybe utilizing a curriculum resource with a consumable and then to not have anything and go directly online. So over time, we do engage our teachers in conversations around if some people have an interest of maybe doing different printing, we could investigate that, but it wouldn't be that we would just say we wouldn't purchase anything. So we're looking at a 6-year contract.
And this contract also includes any new updates that they produce. We get the newest edition.
Okay, good. A couple more. The people that didn't vote for this, what was the negative for them? What was it that they were not super impressed with or happy or felt was not what they wanted? Can you give us an example?
I can speak to that. I know our GT resource teacher felt that just the other curriculum maybe had a little bit more of a push in the GT resource area. However, he also felt that the one that we chose does have options for that students to enhance their learning in other ways too. Okay. But I know that was one of the areas he had mentioned. As far as the other thing, we don't know how everybody individually voted, so I can't necessarily speak to everybody.
I think another thing that we often hear about is being true to the new program. And so when you're teaching, and let's say it's something in estimation that you've got some other things that you've got in your cupboard that you know does a really great job, are teachers still allowed to incorporate some of the things that they've used in the past that they know, or do they have to stick totally to this curriculum?
I think when we start for the first year, that's one thing that we're going to impress upon teachers is we really want them to maintain fidelity to the program, so that it's important for us, since we are such a large district with 13 elementary buildings, it's important that we have teachers maintaining that fidelity. So when our kids all come from separate elementary schools and enter into the 2 middle schools, we want them to all have the same experiences to be able to do that. Will some teachers have that latitude? You know, as a professional, in my opinion, I trust the teachers to do what they feel is best for their students. If, as we will put together the math leadership team again, if there are areas that come to light that we need to put some special attention to and look at specifically to say, are these areas meeting the needs of our students? We can look at that as a leadership team and then make decisions if we need to supplement that curriculum at that time.
Okay. I just have trouble with the word fidelity, because in my heart, when I know there's an experienced teacher that knows that there's a better way to do something, I think they should have the right to do that. I think that's what's part of being a professional. That's real important to me. And lastly, thank you for all your time and your work, because I know no matter what you pick, somebody's not happy. So that's just the way it goes, but thank you.
I've got a few follow-up questions as well. The school that, or schools, I don't know if there's more than one that had this program that you visited, what school was it?
We went to Eagle Point Elementary in DeForest.
Okay. And I don't know anything about DeForest. How does that school compare to our school in terms of demographics, poverty, the need for enrichment, or?
Their demographics are probably, I don't know what the exact word would be. They have fewer EL students. They have fewer kids in poverty. They do. But we took some of that into consideration when making our decisions too. And when we went in to visit, we made sure that we asked questions that were specific to Wausau, that we could get answers to those questions as well.
Was staying with the current math program, was that an option that was explored?
It was, yes. Both of the two curriculums that we had were both on our vetting list. We felt that we should give them that opportunity. So both of those programs were allowed to come in and present to us.
What was negative, or what is negative about what we're currently using? That's, what have you heard from teachers over the last however many years that's caused you to want to change? Because changing to something new is taken out. So now we're going to put all this on the teacher's plates. Now they have to learn something brand new. You've got to go back to that fidelity to the program. You might want to have a different catchphrase this time, because I know that it wasn't real popular last time. So you got to go through all that again. So there had to be some reason why you didn't want to just stay with what we have.
Absolutely. And, but as far as going back and starting all over again, we're still teaching to the exact same standards. So when we look at our curriculum map, we're not going to have to change much. We might have to realign where we state where we teach them in our new resource, but they're still the same standards. We're still teaching the same standards to all of our students. It may look a little differently, but I think one of the issues that I heard was coherence. And I think, as Julie had spoken to that earlier, as you go from K through 5, we had a little bit of a disconnect between 2nd and 3rd grade in some of the vocabulary that was used in K2 and some of the vocabulary that was used in 3-5. So when we went in and started looking, one of the main, if you go into Ed Reports, which is one of the main proprietors of looking at these types of programs, one of their big 3 is coherence. And they feel that coherence is an extremely important part. So that's one of the reasons that we went with just one program as well.
When I think of, starting over, I'm thinking more along the lines of, from the teacher's perspective of, you get into year 2 or 3 or even further, and Teresa could speak to this better than I could, but I hear about it. You start to learn what you can do with this resource. I've got a student who struggles, and I had this same type of issue last year, and I know exactly what to do. Well, now you're starting all over because you have these new workbooks, you have these new lessons, and so that's why I was wondering, there had to be something significant for you to want to totally change and start
classroom teachers?
We've talked a lot about math discourse, and our current 3-5 program that we have doesn't lead to that math discourse like I feel Ready Classroom does. Ready Classroom has that conversation built in. It's got that ELL vocabulary, resources you can use with that ELL to really help that. And I think having that K-5 will be amazing.
It also has the math practices built in, which is, that foundational piece every student can do from K through 5, or their math career in general. And it's built in right at the beginning of the school year, but then it's also built in throughout each lesson, which is really nice for teachers just to kind of refresh, but not have to overthink it as well.
In terms of tech support, is that something that our district is responsible for, or do they have is there a tech support through the resource that's included with the plan? How does that work?
Yes, there is a technology portion in the resource, and John Uding is in conversations with people from Curriculum Associates to make sure that piece is fluid as well.
Okay.
It will be fully supported by them on our end. It'll be the integration of our student information system into the product to make sure that classes are accurate for teachers and grades and those kinds of things. So it's very similar to the other vendors that we work with.
How does it work with our, is it compatible with, our devices are one-to-one? Is there a tech component to this resource?
Yeah, so that was one of the key questions for all the vendors, and what was important to hear from all of them, that they had moved to HTML5 to get away from flash-based, so it's fully compatible with the iPads as well as the Chromebooks, should someone choose that. So it's really device agnostic that way, which was a nice piece of it. So those things should be fully functioning for teachers and students.
Is there a separate online tech, or is there some separate thing we have to purchase in addition to that, the price that we've been giving?
No, the one quote is all-inclusive.
Okay. Because I had heard that there was an online component to it.
There is, and that is included in the cost.
Part of that price?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah. What was the thinking behind starting with the book study, and is this the first time you started with a book study before vetting curriculum?
You want to talk to that a little bit?
Because that sounds a little unique to me and like a great idea.
It's a newer book out there, the Principles to Actions, and we wanted the team to have a foundational piece. We wanted them not knowing really where to start, and myself, I've gone through many adoptions, but never one with this large of a group, and I haven't done a book study either, but after reading the book, it just seemed to give us a good foundation, having those 6 key components that were able to outline the protocols that we were able to come up with. I think it just gave us a focus, and it gave us a funnel to when we gave them the book at our last meeting before summer break, and we said, here's your homework, just read this book. And I think when we were able to come back together, I think we were all more on a same page and realizing that we're kind of all in this together, and we're going to have to depend on each other to make this happen.
And then my second question is, how important were the site visits to choosing your products? Because that's a ton of work, too. I think the site visits added a lot of insight into maybe what you thought before you looked at it in action.
I think absolutely they did. We saw some things, for instance, at one of the places, their core curriculum, they were supplementing that core curriculum with one of the things from one of the other resources.
So you wouldn't have known that unless you'd gone on the
We
site
would not
visit.
have known that had we not gone to that site visit, no.
So you kind of get the straight talk from teachers who are really using it.
Site
Absolutely.
visits, I'm sorry, Darren. Site visits really do offer our team the application process. So talk to us teacher to teacher, and that's where we were very intentional as a team. We generated a list of about 10 questions that could go quite deep if continuing to ask the why behind it. And teachers are honest. So we went in maybe with one thought or process, and you might leave that site visit saying, well, we would not have known that if someone had not been using the product and been able to give us that honest feedback. Or we might hear about how in the rollout we did this, and if we were to give you advice, do this, or suggest this, or look at something different in your PD plan, or considering a coaching. It's really very practical advice, and to have that opportunity to teach, to talk to teachers and the principal at the school, you can go in deeper. We have some members of our team who have colleagues around the state using one of the 3 products, so they went even deeper and reached out to colleagues to say, we're investigating this as an opportunity. What can you tell us about it? So, you start to have educators, and they're typically very honest and willing to give you either insights on the phone or via emails, and it's an important piece of the process. It really is.
You look at that price for adopting something, and it's huge, and you kind of get sticker shock. On the other hand, then I look at the vetting process, and you did your homework.
The decision was very difficult for some of our people. I mean, there
There were some sleepless nights.
There were, and some stress about, knowing what the impact of this decision is.
And we talked about, we're not only affecting, us as teachers, but our colleagues, the students,
you know, for 6 years and then even beyond that, because this is their foundation. So we really, you know, it was a hard decision. And I was fortunate to go to all 3 site visits. And going into them, my number one was not Ready Math, but after seeing my number one in action and how it worked, and then seeing Ready in action and actually how it worked, I was all about Ready. I think it's going to be good for our students and our teachers. So
I just want to say thank you to the team. It's a huge team, and it was a lot of work on top of everything else you're doing, and we really appreciate that. You make our job easy.
I just wanted to reiterate I'm concerned about the fidelity to fidelity, kind of, because it gets to be kind of a top-down, and one size never fits all. And I just want to make sure that our teachers can walk the fine line that, yes, we want to be true to this new program, but if Johnny is struggling, I can still pull my other tricks out of the bag and work them.
I think that's absolutely my philosophy as well. I think it is, and maybe fidelity isn't the right word, but
well, I think it's a good word. I just know it became a negative word. So
right.
You might,
yes.
So you might want to think of
connotations.
something different.
But
this time.
if we're not strong in our convictions, it may be too easy for some people after a month to just cast it aside and then go solo. So, you know, we want to be strong in our convictions and impress upon them the importance of staying the course. So it's a good word, you're right, but I do understand where the negative connotations come from.
And the feedback that I've received from teachers, both with the reading program and the math program, has improved as time has gone on. So as time has gone on and they've been allowed more freedom to do what they believe is best for each individual child, the feedback has improved greatly. And that's why I was just a little bit worried about, we're going to go back to how it was before, and is it really worth changing what we have right now? I'm a little concerned with a third of the people voting for something else. Perhaps a really interesting vote would have been a final vote of who votes in favor of this compared to what we have right now. That would have been interesting to hear. Now that we've picked our final program, out of 30 whatever people, how many people hope that we go with this rather than sticking with what we have? That would have been interesting.
I think if I spoke for the team, I would be more than comfortable in saying that 100% would rather go with this.
That's good to hear. Because there's always going to be some, you know, some growing pains adopting something new, but if everybody's confident that it's going to be an improvement in the long run, I think that means a lot.
Would anybody think that anybody would say stay with what they have?
On Lance's comment and Teresa's earlier question and my original question, I am concerned about that as well. A third of the team is 9 or 10 individuals, and you all spent a long time in this process. And I want to reiterate my thanks to all of you for that as well. But what would be helpful to me, and perhaps others on this board, is if there was more feedback about the individuals and why they voted, why they didn't vote for this. So we have the GT aspect, but I don't know if that's why everybody who didn't vote for it voted for it. And I know you don't know who voted however, but some kind of information would be helpful. I mean, I tried to Google this program just to see reviews. I couldn't find anything. And I don't know why. I was trying to read all these different reports just to see the feedback. And I really couldn't find anything, but it would be helpful to hear from those individuals that participated why they don't think this is the right program. Because certainly a unanimous vote would be much more comfortable. I'm concerned about a third not being supportive of this program.
Do we know how long DeForest has been using this program?
2 years. 2 years.
And Andrea, I have a question for you because we always get this. Okay. I know you have a large committee.
Yes.
We're always asked, how was the committee selected? Could you just tell me how that was done?
Sure. I believe the first task was we've had a very active elementary leadership math team the last several years, and Julie or Darren, remind me if I'm incorrect, but I believe we started by asking members of that leadership team if they would be willing to participate in this process. So we kind of started with individuals already in a math leadership position, and then we built the team from there. So we identified teachers who represented, because we wanted balance between the grade levels, the schools, the other categories, EL, title, we have a science teacher, so we knew it would be a large team representing all of these different areas. So we started with our leadership members first, and then worked to fill in to create that balance moving on from there.
And did you take volunteers?
Take volunteers, I'm trying to remember.
I think that initial piece, I think I had mentioned to the math leadership team that we were suspending the math leadership team for 1 year, and that was due to this team being formed, and many of those teachers were on this team as well, and I think I had extended to them. I don't know if it was an actual volunteer basis, but those people definitely knew, and I was contacted by some of those teachers to say I would definitely be interested and would like to be on the team.
And we were constantly in communication with our campus principals, so we were letting them know how we were going to build the team from the ground up. So they would have then an opportunity to share that out at their building. If somebody was really interested who maybe wasn't on the math leadership team, then we would go from there, and then it became creating a list, and email invitations were sent out, and in some grades, for a variety of reasons, and we always say to individuals, if it's not the time is not right, if you have personal commitments or other things, a no is absolutely respected, and so that if we would get a no, then we would have to go back to the principal and say, okay, we're looking for a representative in your building, would you want to give us some names or information, and then the next email goes out after that. So in some, I'm thinking in one grade in particular, we received, for all very legitimate reasons, quite a few no's, until we could then fill the slot in that grade level, or multiple people in that grade level.
Thanks, Andrea, because we often have people that feel that they're left out, and I just wanted to know how you went about making your committee, so thank you.
And I would feel more comfortable if a general ask went out and let the teachers come forward instead of management always inviting certain people.
Thank you. Darren, right?
Yes.
Well, 18 months is a long time, so congratulations everyone to finally get here. It looks like there was really strong representation from everyone across the buildings here. I've been reviewing the slides, and something that maybe is missing, and you can fill in the context for me. I didn't quite understand why we took on the initiative to do the evaluation or the search for this new math resource. I heard a little bit earlier when Lance asked some questions. Some of you talked about coherence and discourse. To me, when I think about those words, I think about engagement, interaction with the students, getting them to be more drawn into the curriculum or the standards or the teaching that all of you are providing. So that's my first question, is why? And if you can tell me what was the driving purpose on looking at a new math resource, that would be my first question.
Okay. This is the last year of the 6-year contract that we currently have. So no matter what, we were going to need a new contract to either extend the contract that we had or bring in a new resource. And which is what we did. We did bring in expressions, which we have for K2. We brought in, and technically that's a Houghton Mifflin product. They actually had a newer, brand new series that we brought in to look at, because it was the program that we were using was actually, I believe, 8 years old, I think. So a lot of progress has been made in the teaching of math over the past 8 years. And the same with Envision, which we're using for 3.5. We brought in the Pearson representatives, and they showed us the Envision 2.0, which was their upgraded version, which there were some aspects of that we really did like. We liked their assessment piece that they brought along, but it just didn't fit with some of the other things that we were looking at, as far as bringing in that discourse and bringing in the math practices and those things that we really wanted our teachers to be able to know and do. And they just didn't really fit with where we were going. We've been bringing in the Math Institute of Wisconsin to do our PD for the last year and a half. And those programs just, they didn't really align with what our vision was moving forward.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that feedback. My second question is, it looks like all of you completed your due diligence, and it's very clear and concise in your process. Can you talk a little bit more about what the implementation would look like? Are you hoping to have this new math resource or resources implemented in the next school year? Or what does that timeline look like as far as implementation, training, getting buy-in, making sure everyone's acclimated before you roll out? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Our plan is to have, we are going to have the teacher resources in the teachers' hands before they leave for summer break. Initially, it was our intention to have a full-blown PD session for our teachers, but with all of the weather and the cancellations and everything that's happened, it's now looking like that first day, one of those first days in August is going to be implementation for our teachers. One of the other things that we're looking at is this company does have quite a bit of online training where teachers can go online and obviously all of their resources online, but they actually have training videos online. So between now and the end of the year, that's going to be my task, is to look at those things and maybe find 2 or 3 or 4 of those videos or presentations or webinars that the teachers can access that may be most beneficial to them coming into the new year. But we will have full implementation for the 2019-20 school year.
And we're currently in conversation with our representatives from Curriculum Associates developing a PD plan. Darren, Snyder, and myself, a comprehensive plan for multiple years. We know what has worked well in the past is that we have to have a multi-year plan of professional learning and support, because it just continues over time, and a different level of support looks different depending on the feedback from our educators. So we're working right now to get a cost proposal, what that will look like for a multi-year plan of support.
And this is going to last for the next 6 years?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. We've talked about this, the last program being a 6-year contract. You're talking about a new 6-year contract. Does that mean, I assume that means another 6 years we'll be coming back and we'll be looking at another 6-year contract? Obviously there's a cost factor involved in this. I haven't heard what the bottom line is. And number 2, what does the contract mean? I mean, I don't have any question about your vetting and all the work you've done, but I do have some question about what does this contract mean?
That just means that over the next 6 years, this will be our core resource, the universal tier resource for all K-5 elementary teachers. Any new additions that come out during that 6-year period, Curriculum Associates will automatically upgrade us to that newest version. So I believe our intent is to have this paid off half this year out of it.
No, we
No?
actually, we have a budget
The budget proposal.
We have a budget proposal currently as part of our budget reconciliation plan, and the proposal indicated approximately $600,000 for the 6-year curriculum purchase. That's the negotiations that Darren and I are in right now with our representative, and I'm very optimistic that it's going to be less than $600,000. So until we chose the product, we couldn't be premature, and now that we have, you have some opportunity to negotiate. So that's where we're at right now.
Thank you again for all your hard work on this.
Any other questions, comments? Then I would seek a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education the approval of the adoption of the new elementary core math resource, Ready Classroom Math.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Our next...
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda. This is
We have
so
lots
fun.
of
You
fun
don't want to
tonight.
stay for the
The
rest.
math is done. The fun part's done.
Well, there's more
Thank
math
you.
coming up.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're practicing subtraction.
Move up.
There's some front row seats available.
Yeah.
These headphones on, like the United Nations, wouldn't that be cool?
Next item on our agenda is the budget reconciliation plan, which is not as popular as the other.
We'll see if I get a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to call your attention to a document that's in board book, and it looks like this. What I'm going to show you up on the screen, I know it's a little ways away, but I was envisioning the boardroom when I put this together. All the information on the interactive spreadsheet I'm going to show you is in this document. It's just the interactive one makes it more fun, right? So I want to start by looking at the spreadsheet and considering our assumptions that we're making in our budget projection model. Probably, in all honesty, the third or maybe fourth time you've seen these projections, so I won't spend a lot of time. We're assuming 2% salary growth for all categories of employment. We're assuming a health insurance premium increase of 8%. All along, our loss ratio is at about 118%, maybe 119, meaning we're 19% underfunded right now, so that should be closer to 19%. But the premium increase is going to be 8%, then we're going to do some other things that I'm going to talk about in a little while. Another assumption, 0% department and site budgets. All the school budgets, 0%. All department budgets, capital improvements, all of those things. Education department, 0% increase. Now, aside from that, we do have a curriculum request, but all departments, 0. Utilities, 0. Transportation, through our new contract, up 9.5%, which is a bargain compared to the 20s and 30s that we saw come in. Per pupil revenue limit adjustment. Pay attention on Thursday night when the governor presents his budget. We'll see how accurate that is. $200 per pupil revenue limit adjustment. We could maybe see a $200 per pupil categorical aid adjustment. We could see a combination. I had our boardroom, not full, but I had quite a few people on Friday talking to North Central Wisconsin legislators just this past Friday. One of them mentioned $300. Mentioning it doesn't automatically get it through, but the fact that lawmakers are talking about a $300 per pupil increase is pretty optimistic. Our assumption is $200. The next one is the one I'm probably most optimistic about. 24.5% is the special ed reimbursement currently. We've heard talk of 27.5, 30, 35, 60. Now the 60 wouldn't come all at once, but maybe a 30 and then a 60 or a 30 and a 35. We'll keep an eye on that one. That's probably one of the most interesting things I'm going to be looking for on Thursday night. And just because it's in the governor's proposal doesn't mean both houses are going to pass it, but it's at least a start. So those are the assumptions, and then with the assumptions, that number is the deficit that we're projecting. And with a $120 million budget, $322,000 deficit, that's pretty good. We're pretty close. So we start out pretty close, even if our assumptions were to hold true. Here's the reconciliation plan itself, which you do see in your board documents. And I'm going to start at the bottom. And the bottom is a category of should appear as pink in your board docs. Something else up here. But the pink ones are reductions. And the category on the bottom that I have highlighted are all reductions that are relatively impact-free, relatively, or are on the way to happening already, or have already happened. The top one, restructuring of the HR department. That's well on its way. That's with a savings of $90,000. The second one, change in health insurance. Our committee's meeting again on Wednesday. We're interviewing some third-party administrators. We're considering increasing the deductible. We're considering introducing co-insurance. We're considering a 4-tier prescription drug plan. We're considering a narrow network. It's difficult. We're trying to do everything. We want it to be affordable. We want it to be valuable. We want it to have a low deductible. We don't want it to have co-insurance. our interests are competing. We have to pick some combination that will arrive at increasing our funding levels by about 18 or 19%. 8% is already built into the premium increase, but where's the other 10 going to come from? It's been stated over and over again through that committee, we want to preserve choice. We want choice. Narrow network, we don't want, we want choice. All going to the high deductible plan. We don't necessarily want that, we want choice. So we're thinking about a combination or a hybrid. Narrow network if you stay in the traditional plan, continued broad network if you go to a high deductible plan. It would still offer a network choice. It would still offer a choice between high deductible and traditional plan. Of course, it's not going to serve everybody perfectly, but it does preserve choice, which our committee over and over again states as a priority. So we're going to have that discussion on Wednesday, and you're going to hear from us again in the next month or two on what our choices are. Change assumption on interest revenue. We are in a rising interest rate climate. We can adjust our assumptions and capture some interest revenue. More closely adhere to facilities use rate schedule. This one's an interesting one. We're going to bring an improved facility rental schedule to you in the next several months. If I look at 10 districts that are very comparable to us, and I tune in on revenue captured from renting facilities, our average in the Wausau School District is about $16 per student for a year. The average of our comparables, even if I throw out the highest and the lowest, is about double that. Excuse me, ours is $8 per student. The average is $16. So other school districts are capturing $50,000, $60,000, $80,000, $90,000 more in rental revenue. Now, some of them are maybe on the far end where they're charging for everything and they don't have to, but the average is capturing $30,000, $40,000 more in revenue than we are. So $20,000 isn't a stretch just if we adhere to our schedule or maybe make a couple adjustments. Those are costs in most cases that our buildings and grounds department is incurring, but we're not recapturing the revenue. Move our SROs from the general fund to the community service fund. We fund one half of our SROs, the city funds the other half. If we can move that into Fund 80, it's money we would still have to levy. It wouldn't go out of our budget, but the pressure on our budget right now is in Fund 10. It's in the general fund. If we can move it into Fund 80, puts a little bit more pressure on the levy. You'll recall we're in the process of some defeasance strategies, so we have some flexibility in our levy, but that would free up $140,000. Reduce electric, that's going to be paying free. The market and the rates suggest that. I've got some great news for you on what we're doing with natural gas. I'll be sharing in the next couple of months. Reduce 4K payments to third-party providers. Fewer third-party providers and fewer students in the partners. And that's just having a budget that reflects what's actually happening. So that doesn't change our plan at all. Reduce contracted employment services budget. We do use in our buildings and grounds budget and our technology department, we do use contracted services from time to time. But our budget's too much. We don't recognize the amount that we have in our budget. So adjusting our budget is the only thing we're going to be doing there. Reduce wellness by 1/2 to reflect what we're actually spending out of the wellness budget every year. We're spending close to $4,500. The budget is $9,000. Adjust the special ed categorical aid. I hope the 27.5 is a floor. I'm certainly hoping it's 30 or maybe even higher. We previously had the assumption at 24.5. Let's bring it up to 27.5. That'll help us by $405,000. And we all know that help to special ed funding doesn't just go to special ed funding. It goes in the general fund because currently the general fund transfers about $10 million to special ed. So if we help special ed, we really are helping the entire budget. Adjust the number of retirees since I presented to you last. Another 1.5, I think, retirees revealed themselves. So that's another help to the budget. If we add these items up, $1.114 million. So that's $1 million in budget cuts that we can do through things that are already happening, HR department restructure, health insurance restructure, and many things that are relatively impact-free. With that, let's move up on this schedule. Here are 3 more items. The ones in dark green are one-time costs. The peer expansion, that's a curriculum cost. Just for the curriculum involved with peer expansion, $36,000. One time only for expanding peer. The next one was the one you heard from just a minute ago. It's currently $600,000. That was the original request. I don't want to disturb the negotiations. Andrea and I are talking about that regularly. What Andrea is doing with the company, I don't want to disrupt by having in a public session say it's anything but 600. So we're just going to leave it 600. Let the negotiations take place. We'll come to you with hopefully a smaller number when you actually get to vote on this. This is not for action tonight. $1,550, an additional 2 hours per week for gifted and talented support staff. That one remained. The $45,000 is for CTE teachers. That was the plan that John Winter brought forward. The original plan was $75,000. That's $45,000 of recurring expenses that will be directed towards the programs of distinction in career technical ed. $45,000 that will go towards salary in one way or another in our career tech programs. And that is throttled back from $75,000 to $45,000. From there on up, everything comes in pairs. And every time we want to accept a request, it comes at a cost. And almost always that cost isn't a dollar amount. That cost is what else has to be given up in our budget in terms of personnel or stuff. So with that, I'll flip to this other visual. And this is where it's fun because it's interactive, right? A little bit more shorthand here, but that's the original budget deficit, $322,000. If we accept, what could have changed from the time we started this thing? You can confirm that. That one right there is working. I'm going to take this number and it's $624,000. I'm going to put $624,000 in. Okay. And if we start to accept some of those pain-free or already underway assumptions, one of them is the health plan change, one of them is restructure the HR department, and the other one was reduced utility costs and reduced 4K partners. You start to see that we've got a $591,000 surplus in our budget. So everything that happens from this point on is a result of the requests that have been made. So if we had no requests, this would be a very easy budget to balance. But if we have no requests, that's also just accepting what happened last year as a best case scenario, which we know is not. A budget should be evolving and accepting requests and other things fall off, and accept new requests and other things fall off. But we're at $591,000. Adding the high quality programs of distinction, it reduces that surplus a little bit. Adding GT support reduces that surplus a little bit. Elementary math curriculum as it stands right now is $600,000. We're pretty close to balanced, $55,000 within balance. Peer expanded curriculum, if I would have put instead of, oh, that's 824, I saw it, that's too small, I'm going to put 824 in there. Actually, we're at a surplus of 107. And those are the one-time requests, the curriculum requests, the stuff we're buying, the expanded peer. The peer expansion staffing would cost $232,000. Somewhere over here, we have to find staffing reductions of 3. That's 2 professional staff, 1 support staff. As I mentioned earlier, usually the cost isn't dollars. The cost is staffing elsewhere. And I've got data over and over and over again, and so does Dr. Hiltz, that our district as a whole is adequately staffed. I don't want to say generously staffed, but it's adequately staffed. So when we bring staffing requests forward, I think it's in our best interest to find staffing reallocations elsewhere so our staffing in general stays relatively flat. Again, I've got data comparing to other school districts of comparable demographics, and we're staffed more generously than they are. So every time we have a staffing request, we need to adjust staffing.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm following you. So when I take a look at the additional expense for the peer expansion costs recurring 232, and where it says expense reduction of 2 professional staff and 1 support staff of the 185, are you saying that you're taking away 2 professional staff and 1 support staff in order to recoup the 185 to support the 232?
Yes.
Or are you taking those 3 positions and saying, you know what, you fit into the expansion or at peer, and you're going to now reallocate those resources to go teach at peer, or you're actually going to dissolve those 3 positions in order to cover the cost of expanding peer?
Not dissolving those 3 positions necessarily, but somewhere district-wide, we have to absorb 3 staff. So in that particular case, the difference between the 232 and the 185 is just staffing. The 232 is lease costs and some other costs that are wrapped in. But we are expecting to staff the expanded peer with 3 staff people. 2 professional staff and 1 support staff. If they already came from somewhere else and that ends up getting absorbed, that's how we'll define the 3. If we can't do it that way, they might have to come from 3 somewhere else. That will be decided in the next probably month with our staffing. So I wish it were more clear where these are the 3 that we're going to reduce, but at this point it's not that clear. And you're going to see that recurring with these other staffing additions.
Okay. So you don't know yet then?
Don't know yet.
Okay. No. Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm following.
Yep. And we'll be able to ask more questions. Wave coordinator, additional $45,000 in additional staffing. That comes with increased wave revenue. So that was an easy one, and it's offset. The cost is increased revenue. That was easy. Mental health and socioeconomical learning staffing. Our initiative through the Habits Grant, that funding went away. We want to at least maintain part of it for our plans. An additional $256,000 in costs, all highlighted from our documents we shared with you in December. So you see the specifics of that. If we want that, the cost is 2.7 staff. So we have to find somewhere in the district 2.7 staff that would allow us to capture that request. An additional nurse. We know from the budget request that was made in December, that's a $72,000 cost. But more precisely, it's the cost of 1 professional staff somewhere in the district. Can we find $72,000 that's not staffing? We can. We're going to look hard. But we already found $1 million in cuts that came from non-staffing, right? To get us to where we are now. So 2 points or 1 professional staff. Additional special ed staffing, $271,000. The cost is another 4.5 staff from outside of special ed.
I have a concern about the nurse. You know, even if we're adequately staffed, when we heard the presentation about adding the nurse position, it seemed like as far as nurses in the district and the number of students we have and the recommendations, we really weren't where we should be. Am I right about that? That's just my general impression. I remember thinking. And I can remember thinking that in the district where I work too, that nurses are really spread thin and that there are more medical issues now. So that's one I have a concern about. And everything's a trade-off, I get that. But I don't think we're really within the recommendations for how many nurses we should have for a district this size. So that one I have a concern about from a safety standpoint.
You know, I think what people aren't understanding, Bob, is we're not cutting a nurse. It's just going to come from somewhere in the district. So it might be an elementary position that the class size just doesn't warrant keeping 3 first-grade teachers. It's going to go down to 2. But we're not cutting a
Yes,
nurse.
as a matter of fact, I'm going to say something that maybe clears this up a little bit. I got off the rocky start with that button not working. Right? And I was thinking if we put all these headphones on, we could be like the United Nations, so I got a little distracted. So the cutting's the nurse. As a matter of fact, if we could cut a nurse, an additional nurse, it wouldn't show up as a request.
Right.
The reason it
I
shows
realize
up
that.
as a request is that Angela Lloyd looks at all the nurses and says, there's not room in this budget for me to support another nurse, so it has to be a budget request, therefore come from another place. Special ed, think about the 4.5 request on top for special ed. Those requests almost certainly will not be special ed, because if Judy Lodahl could have found staffing inside the special ed world, which happens all the time, it would never rise to the level of the board. So almost in every case, the requests are going to have to be met with staffing outside the request, right? Elsewhere.
And we can think about the possibilities now, but until we know what the real numbers are, and what the reimbursement really is going to be for special ed, and what we know what the aid package is going to be for next year, we're just kind of planning and thinking.
And we likely won't know before we have to have a preliminary budget approved in June, as I'm listening to the representatives.
And then the difficulty will be, what if the numbers come back more a generous budget from the state than what we're anticipating? Where do we put the additional resources? For every $100,000 of resources we get from Madison that we didn't know we were going to get, what's our next priority? Not reducing a staff that we had planned to reduce, increasing employee compensation beyond 2%, knowing that CPI is 2.44%. So you start to think about what happens if Madison comes through with 30, 35, 40%, $300 per pupil. What happens to the additional staffing that isn't built into the reconciliation plan right now? We're going to have to make those decisions into April, May, even beyond. So that's going to be a challenge. Now, you're not asked to vote on this tonight, but more or less a status report. I don't want things to be surprises. So when I come with the adjustment and health insurance plan, hopefully you have heard it before. When we come with a budget reconciliation plan that matches a lot of this, hopefully you've heard it before. Andrea and I are working together on that curriculum. Maybe we'll have a better number by the time you get to vote on that. So just a status report, not asking for any action from you, but certainly can field more questions if you have them.
Bob, I have a question. There's going to be money in mental health, special ed, some of these programs, at least if the governor has his way. We've got a compensation for career technical education teachers that the budget request has been reduced. Is there some way that some of that funding could be used to help kids that are specifically in that program that would benefit from those services?
Not from the CTE reduction, because the CTE reduction getting lowered essentially makes it available for everything else, not anything in particular. But your first reference to the state of Wisconsin is going to make money available specifically to be directed towards mental health and special ed, depending on how that's restructured, or it's structured. If the budget that ends up getting passed increases categorical aid for special ed, that's almost unrestricted revenue, because it'll take away from the $10 million that gets transferred. If it's more of a grant program that's specifically for any mental health experts or contracting out a mental health contracted services, then it will go a little bit more precisely for what you're talking about. We'll have to keep an eye on what happens on Thursday and beyond. But I think everybody understands that categorical aid, right? That just takes away from the transfer that has to happen. So it really does help the general fund.
Any questions? No. Item number 5, the Wisconsin School Nutrition Purchasing Cooperative Agreement.
Back again. So Wausau School District has been a member of the Wisconsin School Nutrition Purchasing Cooperative for the past several years. In your board books, you have all the background information information on the governance and the bylaws of this purchasing cooperative. The main benefits are cost savings, of course, and then education and sharing of best practices and policies with the changing child nutrition regulations. So tonight, I am asking that the board takes action to sign this cooperative agreement for the 2019-2020 school year.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Is the $100,000 our share of the cost, or is that the shared cost throughout all the others that are part of the cooperative?
That's correct. It's a shared cost. We paid $300 to belong to that cooperative. Thanks.
Okay, then I would seek a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education to continue membership in the Wisconsin School Nutrition Purchasing Cooperative.
So moved.
Second.
I didn't quite finish yet. By passing the presented resolution and agreeing to the 2019-2020 cooperative agreement.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Now, at this time, I'd like to switch things up a little bit just to make this agenda a little bit cleaner, and I would seek a motion to adjourn, because then we'll do the tour afterwards. So I seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.